Hello, YNABers. My name is Jesse Meekum, and this is podcast number 14 for You Need a Budget, where we teach you 4 rules to help you stop living paycheck to paycheck, get out of debt, and save more money. We are now well into 2012. How are you guys doing on your tiny habits? I'm doing little changes for big victories. I haven't quite picked out a new tiny habit that I'm going to work on yet, but we do have a new tiny person in our house, which was quite exciting. Happened a few days ago. And so all sorts of habits will be forced upon us. Getting up in the middle of the night, making breakfast for me. Anyway, so everything is topsy-turvy over in our household, and recording this podcast is somewhat cathartic at the moment. I have a very cool success story interview with Brian from Portland, so I will jump right over to that. He mentions in his interview Getting Things Done by David Allen, a book I recommend. I use David Allen's philosophy. It's called GTD for short, and I use it to get things done. Anyway, he mentions that and mentions specifically a talk he saw, and it reminded him of budgeting, specifically Rule 2. Anyway, if you guys want to watch that video, you can catch it at ynab.me/GTD. So ynab.me/GTD, getting things done. Anyway, I will cut over to Brian, let you guys have a listen. Normal guy that's done some cool stuff with his money. And no magic here, just hard work and awareness. Here he is. Okay, I'm here with Brian from Portland, Oregon. And Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's good to be here, Jesse.
It's very good to have you on. Now, I got a word from Ann that, if I remember right, she said you've been using YNAB for about 4 years. Is that right?
I think that's about right.
Okay, so you've definitely been around for a while. So you can probably provide some tips to everyone listening that's just starting or, just getting going.
Right.
So tell everyone, just so they can kind of get an understanding of you and where you're at, tell everyone what you do for a living.
Well, I'm an airport operations supervisor at Portland International Airport here in Portland. I work for the port who owns and operates the airport. And what we do, I work on a team of about 12 people, and we're just kind of looking over everything that moves at the airport, whether that's baggage or cars or people or airplanes, and looking for problems and anticipating problems. And if we see issues that are impeding the flow, we figure out a workaround to get the flow moving correctly again. So we work very closely with the FAA and air traffic control and the airlines and all the tenants who have shops at the airports and of course all of the passengers to make sure everybody's airport experience is as smooth and stress-free as possible. I
see. So it's if you're trying to alleviate people's stress, does that mean that you get pretty stressed? Is it a pretty high stress job?
It's not terribly high stress. Excuse me. It's ordinarily the airport runs itself really, and it runs pretty well. So oftentimes we're just kind of sitting around looking for things to do. But sometimes it will, it's like some people describe their jobs as hours of boredom punctuated by moments of sheer terror. And this job can be that way sometimes because when things don't go right, when the weather gets really bad or when the baggage sortation system decides to malfunction, then things can go south in a hurry and you have to be ready to respond to it. So it can get stressful in those peak times, those brief intense periods, but overall it's a pretty low stress job.
Okay. Well, there's probably some corollaries to the financial world with moments of everything being fine and then one moment where it's absolute terror, so
right.
I could see that. So you've been using YNAB about 4 years. If you can remember, describe your financial situation prior to finding YNAB.
Well, prior to finding YNAB, I had been using Quicken, and for me, it had really kind of devolved into just a glorified check balance or checking account register. And I wasn't doing a particularly good job of keeping it totally up to date. And I was looking for something that would be able to interface with my bank accounts online. And the version of Quicken that I had was too old to be able to talk to my bank accounts online. I initially was looking to upgrade the version of Quicken that I had, and I decided to shop around a little more and did a Google search and somehow came across YNAB. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized that it was a completely novel approach to handling money and was much more involved than just a simple checking account register.
Yeah. Now, it's important to note that YNAB doesn't connect with your bank, and that was kind of the impetus for you originally looking for a replacement for your older Quicken software, was because it would no longer connect. So, did you just decide that feature wasn't important, or kind of tell me how your thought process there?
Well, I guess it depends on how you define connect to your account, because I can, what I was doing before when I was just using Quicken was by hand entering each individual item and then trying to reconcile that against my bank statement, which is very time consuming. But with YNAB, I can still download statements from the two accounts that I have and reconcile them much quicker than I could back when I was using Quicken.
Gotcha. Okay, so you're still recording. You're using you're using the downloading of the bank statements as a reconciliation, kind of a true up of what's happening.
Exactly. Okay. I still come home and enter stuff by hand, but it's once or twice a month I'll download the bank statement and instantly be able to see whether there's a discrepancy, something that I've missed putting in or put in twice accidentally.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's very quick and easy.
So you were using Quicken. Did you feel like you were pretty on top of your finances, and was this kind of just more of like a software switch for you, or were there some, did you, from using the method or seeing YNAB as you mentioned being kind of a novel approach, did that change how you began managing your money or anything like that?
It really changed how I managed my money. I think I thought when I was using Quicken, I thought I had a pretty good idea or a good handle on my finances. But the more I read about using YNAB, the more I realized that I didn't have a very clear picture of where my money was at any given time. I wasn't overdrawing or bouncing checks or anything like that. But I also certainly didn't have a buffer in place like I do now, where I am spending the money I made last month, this month, and spending the money I'm making this month, next month. That concept was totally foreign to me before I learned about YNAB.
Okay.
And I had never budgeted before. I had always kind of assumed that budgeting was for people who were like, I don't know, lower income or had a lot of financial problems. And I didn't really see myself as having a lot of financial problems, but I didn't really appreciate how much my my personal finance skills could be improved.
I see.
Until I found out about the 4 rules and all of the stuff that comes with it.
Gotcha. That's interesting. What was the? There are people that are listening to this that are just getting started, and maybe they're struggling. Did you have any portions of the starting phase, or was there a hard part that you remember where it was kind of an obstacle for you in getting going?
I think it took a little while for me to really understand how it worked and what should go where, and I would sometimes confuse myself by if I wanted to move money around, say, like take it away from one bucket or one category and move it into another, just getting the positive and the negative numbers to work out correctly so that, just the mechanics of it took a little while, and it really helped to have the online forums, the community that surrounds YNAB, to use as a resource, because I could ask a question, say, I'm a little confused about how I should be entering such and such thing. And usually within an hour, it seemed, somebody would have responded with the answer, which was really, really nice. It felt, I know that your community of users has probably grown tremendously since I was first getting started, but 4 years ago, it really felt like a small club, and there was a lot of personal attention, I felt, and everybody was kind of helping each other and being supportive, which was a nice feeling. I'm sure you would not, I don't know if there are such things as Quicken user groups or forums, but I doubt you would feel that kind of close-knit energy that you do with the YNAB forum.
Yeah, it's an interesting, I don't know why it's happened, but it is a very friendly place, and usually forums you get quite the opposite. You get, I don't know, sometimes people that are pretty darn, to maybe put it nicely, they're at least snippy,
Right.
Where
a lot of smart.
Just snarky stuff. So it's been fun to see that the community really is kind, and I'm glad for that. I'm glad you had that experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think you set the tone there. I think it's clear what, from you on down, it's clear what the attitude is like and the standards are that are.
That's true. That's true. So if I'm feeling lousy in a particular day, I just do not log into the forums. Just avoid them, just to make sure I don't shoot my mouth off. No.
There you go.
Those are a great resource, and I like also that you can, it's like a one-off question situation, but then you find out, 5 people coming behind you are going to have the same question, and they all benefit. So it's quite a nice system.
Exactly.
So
if I could just throw one other thing in there, Jesse. I think something that took me a little bit of time in the beginning was becoming disciplined about entering truly everything, not just so-called major expenses, where you would enter if you spent $20 or $30 on something, but then if you went and got coffee and you paid cash for it and they asked you if you wanted a receipt, you would say no and forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
When you use YNAB, I think it really behooves you to treat every expense, no matter how small, just like you would a large expense, so that it all gets covered and everything, all your balances stay reconciled. And you can then really appreciate how those little tiny $1s and $2s and $3 expenses can add up over time.
Yeah. And it's also critical, I think, in creating a long-lasting habit, where if you let yourself slide, at what point, where does that needle stop at, what's saying, well, this is material. This is $5 is something I record, but $4.90 is not.
Right.
And pretty soon that's moved all the way up to a point where you've stopped recording. And people don't think that'll happen, but it happens.
Yep.
It's kind of like
it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, trying to eat healthy. You're like, well, I'll just have this one,
and
then pretty soon that means 6.
Right.
So.
Right.
At least in my case, with temptations surrounding me. Well, you've been using it for 4 years now. So what's kept you going? That's a pretty long time to, people are always looking for positive behavioral change, and it seems like it's just this elusive thing. But this has obviously been a positive change for you. How have you hung on to it?
I think it really became a necessity after I bought my home. I purchased my first home a couple of years ago, and I was aware that my expenses were going to go up, and everything from utilities to repairs to just the mortgage being more than the rent. But I was actually a little surprised at just how much my overall expenses increased. And so on a single income, it becomes even more important to be really aware of where all my money is at any given time, because it's a heavy load to carry. And so I think that has been a real motivator for me to keep going. But, even before I bought the house, there was something enjoyable. I like systems. My job is very much about systems operation, system management, system analysis. And it was so cool to see a visual representation of where everything was at a given time. And if I make a change over here, what is the ripple effect downstream? For me personally, that made using YNAB a lot of fun, because you could kind of treat your whole financial operation as a system to tinker with and play with and make adjustments in. And it was just personally so much more comforting to eliminate a lot of the unknowns about, well, how much money do I really have, and how many open transactions do I have floating out there that I'm not aware of, that are going to hit my credit card statement or hit my checking account and be a surprise to me. With YNAB, if you use it faithfully, you eliminate all of that unknown, and you gain a lot of peace of mind, I think.
Yeah. It's interesting because you're kind of, I've started kind of latching on to this analogy, but I liked what you said about things, the ripple effect downstream, and I imagine it as kind of a ripple effect that flows into the future, where you'll be there in this fairly abstract, but future you will be there, and you've got present you that has a huge effect on future you,
Yes.
And decisions you make now can mean when this big bill comes due that you're totally stressed, or it can mean you don't feel anything at all, and,
Absolutely.
And it's an amazing power you have over your future situations that arise, whether you can make them just horrid or just not even something you talk about,
Right.
And so that's a good thought about that ripple effect that kind of flows into the future, and getting a feel, like you were saying, on these floating transactions that are out there. Not like, you've written a check that's floating, but like just things will come up that are in your future that you may or may not know about. And prepping for those is, I don't know, there is a lot of peace there. So I like how you said that.
Right. Well, I looked into BJ Fogg, who you recommended on a previous podcast, and his work in building good habits was very interesting, and I'm kind of pursuing some of his stuff. And another guy that I've been reading about lately is a guy named David Allen. Who wrote a book called Getting Things Done.
Mm-hmm.
And I was watching a lecture that he gave to Google employees that's on YouTube. It's pretty easy to find. And one of the things he says in that lecture is our ability to cope in life has a lot to do with our ability to handle the unexpected. And he draws an analogy between life and martial arts, and kind of he's into karate, and he says his skill in karate comes from being able to react properly and in a measured way to what he didn't know was coming. Yeah. And the same thing goes for companies as well. But when you're living your life, expenses that you did not see coming will inevitably arrive. And I think this tool, YNAB, really helps you prepare for the unexpected and handle it when it does come.
I like it. I think that's great. I'm going to try and dig that up and maybe link to it when we post this podcast, just so everyone can watch that. Because, well, one, I like David Allen's getting things done. I subscribe to his philosophy and do that whole thing. But I like that particular deal. Being able to, how you handle the unexpected is huge, you know.
Right.
And instead of getting blindsided, you can kind of go in with your eyes wide open and adapt. And it's important for everyone to recognize that you'll always be adapting. I say it again and again. There's no normal month, you know. Mm-hmm. And so it's really just a matter of how your decisions and having good information when you make a decision. And that's where the budget is pretty key. So, absolutely. Do you have any parting advice for YNABers, especially those that are just getting started? Any words of wisdom you want to share from a veteran?
Well, again, it's critically important that you just faithfully enter every transaction, and not get discouraged if you misallocate in one category or another. I don't think there has been a single month since I started using YNAB 4 years ago that I have not overspent in one category or another. It is impossible to accurately predict every expense that you're going to have in every category in any given month, as you just said. And so sometimes you just blow it. You just blow the estimate.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's not a reason to give up or get discouraged. It's all the more reason to use YNAB, because the way the system works, of course, is if you overspend in a given category, it is going to deduct that amount from the amount that you have to allocate in the next month, and so it's kind of a built-in safety valve, if you will. Trying to think if there's any other things to.
Well, one thing that I think is good to note is the budget is not there. The value of a budget is not to teach you how to estimate better or to track how good of an estimator you are. It's really there to present information to you in a way that helps you make good decisions.
Yes.
And that's kind of the gist of it. So I think, I think we can call that a wrap. This one felt kind of philosophical today, so that was kind of fun.
Good.
I hope users get something out of it. I'm sure they will. And it's fun, Brian, to talk to you. And I don't know. I just love hearing. You hear a lot of common threads with stories, but I like hearing the individual stuff. And just kind of your take on things is fascinating to me. So we'll keep plugging along over here, and here's to another 4 years of you rocking it on YNAB. So. I really appreciate you taking the time on the day off to let us do the call. That was fun. And we're back. Thanks, everyone, for listening to Brian's success story interview. If you would like to be on a YNAB podcast in the future, you can contact Anne at youneedabudget.com. That's ANNE at youneedabudget.com. She can set you up. Tell everyone your story. In the meantime, you'll get a little bit of public accountability, and it might do something for your budgeting. So until next time, follow YNAB's 4 rules and you will win financially. You have not budgeted like this.